Well, welcome everybody. It's absolutely thrilled to have everyone along. It's terrific to see so many of our existing More community join us. And it's also great to see those who might be considering using or switching over to More as their solution of choice when it comes to managing their money, properties, and overall wealth story. Please feel free to tell us where you're joining from all around Australia and potentially overseas. Use the Q&A button, please. So let us know where you're joining us from. And also, speaking of that Q&A button, I do have Jade and Ulrich, who are two of our great product managers here at More, and they are going to be joining me tonight as part of this presentation. So what we might do is just switch on our cameras and say g'day to everyone. So thanks very much. Everyone who is joining us live. We can see there, Jade, thank you, and Al's bringing his camera on. So they're going to be also helping us when it comes to the Q&A questions that you're going to be sharing throughout the course of tonight's webinar. And so please, go for gold in terms of that. And I'm just having a look around. So we've got David from Melbourne. We've got Jonathan from Melbourne. Hi from the Ballyneen Peninsula. That's Angela. We've also got Jason from Lemons in Victoria. So thank you everyone for also Central Coast, New South Wales. So we've got plenty of people joining us live. So that's a great effort for those of you who obviously have taken time out of your busy schedule to join us as well. So thank you again. Now I'm going to turn off our cameras so we can focus on the content. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back for Q&A at the end of tonight's webinar. In terms of what we're going to be focusing on here, what I really want to be most focused around best tools for the job is we're going to use an example couple we're going to call Sarah and Chris. Now, they're a hypothetical couple, but we're going to follow them through the journey. So we're going to have a look at them in their 20s, in their 30s, and in their late 40s as part of, sort of being able to organise their finances and what tools they're using for the job as part of that particular story. So let's move into the next slide. I've just got to find it. There we go. Now, really, before we jump into that, I wanted to do a quick overview in terms of what More is. It's an all-in-one platform, and its origin story comes from a group of professionals who have big, deep knowledge in the areas of financial services, property, and wealth creation. So, and we've built it on 4 core pillars. So we've got a lifestyle pillar, and you can see some of the tools and features we have in there in terms of discovery and my goals. We'll learn more about them tonight. In terms of money management, we've obviously got My Financials, the famous Money Smarts, Money Stretch, Money Fit, and that's all about helping you take control of your money. Then we've got the property, the My Financials, helping you then manage your portfolio or individual properties, and also some excellent insights. And we've got some really exciting insights that are going to come through in the next couple of months and over the course of the next couple of years in terms of how people can manage their property investments through our platform. And then finally, we've got the wealth area, right? So this is all about building out that wealth so we can realize those personal goals as part of that particular story. Now, as part of what I was just saying before with Chris and Sarah's story, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build this idea of setting up, jobs to be done and the lifestyle by design as part of that particular story. So we're sort of thinking about, what are those areas of focus, what needs to happen as part of that story. And that leads me into just sort of highlighting some of those things before we get started into the case study tonight. And so More is designed for those jobs to be done. Some of this is administrative work. We absolutely know that, but we want to give you that, all-in-one platform that allows you to do those types of things. So in here, you can set your goals with future plans. You can obviously do purchasing and spending decisions through here. You can do your cash flow modeling, which we'll show you tonight. You can track and manage your property and other investments. There's obviously general household bookkeeping and all of that sort of storing of financial records. For most of us, this is the boring but required stuff, but it's really important that we have a central place for that. Now, More is available for making these things simple and easy for you in respect of organising those goals and making sure, as you can see by the picture there, getting those big rocks in the jar and in the right order that they need to go in the jar. It'll help you with tracking and managing your numbers. If you've been following us on the podcast, The Property Couch, you will know how important it is in terms of the scientific research, that says, if you track and manage, you will increase your results in an incredible way. So that's really important to understand. Prompts and tips to saving you or making more money, thanks to Opti, who's the built-in smart assistant. And again, ultimately run your household finances better as part of that story. And when you're doing that, you're trapping more surplus and you're making that money work for you, which is ultimately around building greater wealth. And that's also then about linking that into your personal and also your financial goals, which we refer to as lifestyle by design. Okay, so as part of this, it's now time for me to hand over to Jade, and she will then introduce our sample couple, which is Sarah and Chris, and we'll embark on their next big rock in the jar journey. So over to you, Jade.
Thank you, Ben. Okay, so let me introduce to you Sarah and Chris. So Sarah and Chris are in their mid to late 20s, no kids, and they've recently had a wedding and their honeymoon. Their next big rock in the jar that they want to achieve is to buy a house, but they're not sure if they have enough savings, how much they need to save, how long it's going to take them, and they're a little bit lost. So Sarah reached out to a friend who recommended them to download more to help them with their financial direction. So Sarah jumped on the App Store, downloaded more, and decided to set it up together with Chris over dinner. Now, the onboarding will guide Sarah and Chris in a number of financial questions to set up their initial numbers to give them a cash flow overview and a net position. So what you'll see is it will ask them what is their income, what are their assets. So it will ask them what is their bank account balance, how much savings do they have any investments. It will also ask for their borrowing figures, if there are any debt, income, and their expenditure. So the idea of going through the onboarding to set up more, the outcome will be you are provided with a cash flow overview and a net position breakdown. So Sarah and Chris are really focusing on their cash flow overview. By entering in their income and their expenses, they want to know how much they can potentially save. Currently, their net position, they don't have too much debt, so it's not a high focus for Sarah and Chris, but that's always there should they have property and debt that they want to keep an eye on also. So let's see if we can dive a little bit deeper into Sarah and Chris. So as I mentioned before, they are in their mid to late 20s. This is an image of their big rocks in the jar. They have recently achieved their wedding, their honeymoon, and the next big rock that they want is to purchase a house. They are interested in the next 5 years or so to also see if they can start planning for a family, have their first child. So what I want to do is I want to show you how Sarah and Chris are using the tools and more so they can unpack their goals and vision, see if their goals are realistic and achievable, and make a plan on how they want to achieve it. So let's go over to more. Now I'm showing you more the web version. More is available in a mobile app and a web version. You have access to your account on both interfaces. There will be a slight change between which features are available in which, mainly due to space and convenience. So on the go features will be heavily produced in the mobile app, whereas deep dive insights will be more inclined to be released in the web version. So the first thing that I want to go through with Chris and Sarah whilst they are trying to understand their direction is the discovery page. So whilst they're sitting down at their dinner trying to work out what's next, what are the big rocks in the jar, what are they trying to achieve, and what's their vision, this is a really helpful tool for them to kind of get on the same page. So the big rocks in the jar table is a list of potential milestones that normally occur throughout a life cycle. And you can have a look at the time periods next to it. So it's really good to have a look at what is happening now for Chris and Sarah. They are wanting to save that first deposit. That's ready now for them. That's what they want to focus on. They don't have much in the happening soon. However, the next big rock for them is they want to buy that first home. Now they've put short term, so they want to try to purchase that within the next 5 years or so. You can also see the next big rock will be to start a family, also within that 5 year period. And of course, when you start a family, there's always going to be additional costs that come along with that. Now, during this journey, when you are looking at what are your next big rocks, there's always going to be some compromise. Some things will get pushed onto the back burner. And in Sarah and Chris's case, they've pushed back money for a holiday. That may not be as important to them whilst they are focusing on their home. That may be delayed a year or two, depending on how much they want this first home. They've also put it not applicable to build the next home or property. They don't have that yet, and they don't seem to have too many debts to pay down. So really good to know as you're going through setting up your vision and your big rocks in the jar, which one comes first, which one is not applicable just yet. And it's always a helpful tool to come back to this every couple of years or so to see if it still aligns. Things do change. Now, the next thing that Sarah and Chris have gone through is what money means to you. It is really good to get in on the same page with your partner on what motivates you with money. So money is just a tool to help you design your lifestyle. It's usually not what you want to achieve. It is a tool to achieve your goals. So in the case of Sarah and Chris, they want security, stability, freedom, happiness, and providing for a family. Now, going through this exercise, you can see how different some people can be in what motivates them to gain money. Now, finally, a quick one, just a plug for the quick money management quiz. Always fun to try this one, see what your score is, to see if there's any improvement. These are just little habits that may help you in improving your money management. If you are looking to save more, to focus on keeping it front of mind, you may pick up some little habits here that you might want to take into account to see if you can raise your score. So Sarah and Chris have unpacked their vision. They really want this house. So the big question from that is the goal realistic and achievable? Let's have a look at the numbers. So the dashboard is an overview of Sarah and Chris's financial situation. Now, all of that data that is showing here is pulled from the financial cards that Sarah and Chris have entered into more. As you can see, the assets, borrowings, income, and expenses will give you your cash flow position and your net position. So with assets, you can see Chris and Sarah have added in living and lifestyle bank account and a savings bank account. So it looks like their current savings is around $35,000. You can see that Sarah's got some shares, they've got their super, and they do share a car. Over into the borrowing side of things, they don't have too much debt as a household. They do have a credit card that they are leveraging, which does have an auto sweep turned on. So it looks like that is getting auto paid from the savings account every month. Coming over into income, Chris and Sarah, both on similar income. Chris is on 84 PYAG. Sarah is on 85,000 PYAG. So our income total of about $169,000 per year. So it's a healthy income. Coming over to expenses, so Chris and Sarah have sat down and unpacked all the expenses that they plan to spend on, and created a card for each of those for them to be able to get to the monthly expected figure of $8,500 per month. Now, this can take a little bit of time to do. However, it's really beneficial to understand what are you planning to spend over the next 12 months. Good thing to see is they have archived their wedding expense. So they had their wedding back in January. That is no longer something that they're saving towards. So this card has been closed. And we can see that this has freed up some of their cash flow because they're no longer putting money towards their wedding. So that's a good thing to see, and it has increased their surplus by decreasing their spending. So all the data that is entered into the My Financials will go into the home dashboard and give you some overview summary. So let's break down their cash flow and what their expected surplus should be and what is their potential savings ability. So Sarah and Chris are both on very similar incomes, so 85, 84. They don't have any other types of income, although Sarah does have 65 for most shares. We can see that they're not doing salary sacrifice, no tax deductions. You can see the amount of tax that is estimated that they will pay. So we are looking at a potential total net income of 65,000 and 64,000. Going down into their expenditure, what you can see is they're looking at about 3,800 per month in bill payments, 4,700 per month in spending. So that gives us that total of 8,523 that we saw earlier. Now, putting those two together, what we are finding is Sarah and Chris have the ability to save up to 2,200 per month. This then totals the $27,000 per year. So that means the good thing is that they are spending less than they're earning, and they have the capabilities to save money. So the big question is, how much do we need and how long will it take us to save up what we need? Now, Chris and Sarah have reached out to a mortgage broker to ask for some initial numbers. Their purchase price that they are wanting to achieve is $620,000, which gives the total cost of purchase $628,000. That includes stamp duties and registration, etc. They've reached out to the lender. The lender will lend them up to $540,000, which includes lender's mortgage insurance. So they do incur lender's mortgage insurance because the LVR is higher than 80%. So the loan that is total available for the purchase is $534,000, which means that Sarah and Chris need to come up with $93,000 shortfall. Now, looking at their current savings, they do have $35,000 currently, which means that they need to find an additional savings target of $58,000. Now, coming back into more, with their yearly target of $27,000, if they spend what they say they're going to spend, it is most likely that they're not going to be able to achieve purchasing this house within the 3 months or 12 months. So keeping that on the short term is more realistic, considering their current numbers. Now, Sarah and Chris have decided that they want to see if they can try to save money for the property over the next 2-year periods. So what they have decided to get the $58,000, what they want to do is save $25,000 this year and then the $35,000 next year. Now, if they do not change what they are currently spending money on, they will be able to hit this year's target very easily. Now, next year, they want to try to save an additional $35,000. Now, if they spend what they say they're going to spend, they're not going to be able to hit that target. So they may have to rework some numbers and see where they can save on and what they can do. So let me introduce to you Money Stretch. So under our money tools, we have a tool called Money Stretch. Now, I personally like to use Money Stretch regularly for any big decisions that I have that are going to affect my money situation. So a bit of an overview of what Money Stretch is. It is a sandpit environment where it calculates what your money in is, how much money you currently have available. You can see that $35,000 there, and your money out. So they don't have too many outgoings outside of their bills and spending. And you can see what their total surplus is, that $2,200 a month which is that $27,000 surplus. So the way that Money Stretch works is it adds in what is your current money available, and then it adds in your total surplus or your deficit for each month and shows you visually where you could be in the next 3 to 4 to 37 months. This is really helpful in the case of, let's say, for example, Sarah wants to leave her job. You can see that they've just reduced their household income by 50%. So you can see if they spend the way that they are going to continue to spend, they may run out of money pretty quickly. So it's really helpful to play around with this to see if you want to reduce your income, do a career change, take a sabbatical, or even if you're expecting some large changes to your expenditure. But let's break this down for Sarah and Chris. So Sarah and Chris want to see if they're able to save an additional $35,000 in year 2. So what we want to do is we want to see if we can increase their monthly surplus to $2,900. So their current surplus is $2,200. We're going to have to tweak some of those numbers to see if we can get that to $2,900, which is the $35,000. So breaking this down into bill payments and spendings, what is really helpful here is a really good exercise is to, when you're setting up your expenses, to really understand what essential and discretionary are. Essential are costs that they're essential to your living. They need to happen, like your rent. Discretionary might be when you go to the grocery store and you add in an extra type of ice cream or something that isn't necessary as part of your living. It's a nice to have, it's a treat. Or digital subscriptions like your Kayo. That's a discretionary. You don't need that as part of your everyday living. So it's really helpful to have a look at what is essential, what is discretionary, and break those down. What we normally find in bill payments, not many will be discretionary. It's not easy for you to pay half of your rent and say the rest is discretionary. It is a bill. It is what you're contracted to pay normally. However, spending is where you can really unpack what you have to spend and what you want to spend. So it's really healthy to have a look at the difference between those two. So let's see if we can have a look for Chris and Sarah. Now, when we went through the discovery phase, Chris and Sarah decided that holidays may take a back burner for them. So every year they have budgeted $6,000 per year towards their holiday. Now, what I'm going to do is remove the discretionary $5,500 that they had allocated to their holidays. I'm going to keep them $500. They can do a weekend away or have a day trip somewhere. We want to look at lifestyle balance. We don't want to cut everything. We still want to enjoy, Chris and Sarah still want to enjoy their life. So I remove that additional $5,500 from their budget. And the ones that I normally like to look out for, which is where people really overspend, is your dining out, your takeaway food, your Uber Eats. So Chris and Sarah have put in $120 plus $50 per week, so about $170 towards Uber Eats or dining out or takeaway. What I'm going to do is just remove the $50 of discretionary spending. They can keep the $120. That's per week. They're able to go out once a week or order in once a week or just get some takeaway food. But I'm just going to remove the $50 per week to see if we can shave off somewhere else. The next one that people normally do overspend on can be your alcohol, tobacco. So what I'm going to do is just remove the $30 from discretionary. I'm going to keep the $50 there. We're not going to go completely empty because we want to be as realistic as possible with your budgeted figures. If you're going to cut everything, but then you're not going to stick to it, it can have more of a detrimental effect. So I'm only going to change those 3 figures, the holiday, the dining out, alcohol. And what I've been able to do is find them potential surplus of $3,099 per month, which is actually $37,000 per year. So well within their savings ability. Sarah and Chris can now find their peace of mind. They now know that the savings goal is possible. I want to take you to how they want to make a plan. Now, before I do, they can publish these changes. Now, for Chris and Sarah, they're not planning on making these changes until the second year of their savings. So if you were to use this tool and you decide that, yep, as of today, I want to make these changes, you're able to click publish changes, which will then update your current expenses. In this case here, I will not, as Chris and Sarah will not be changing these until the second year of their savings. Okay, so let me introduce you to the My Goals page. So Sarah and Chris have decided on setting themselves very smart, measured goals with a due date to keep them accountable to their big, hairy, audacious goal. So this is the My Goals page where you can set any new goal that you have. It is organized chronologically, so you can see that in a bit of a timeline. Now, Chris and Sarah have color-coded all of their goals for their home deposit to green. They've put the icon as the home, and they've updated their balance for every quarter of where it should be, all the way to the 95,000 of what the end goal is. Now, they should be able to achieve this in end of December of 2025, start of January 2026. So in 2 years' time, they should be able to achieve those savings targets. So if they spend what they say they're going to spend, we've been able to unpack that it is possible, it is achievable, but now they need to get cracking on it and keep themselves accountable. The My Goals will notify them on the mobile app every time a goal is due that month, just so it keeps it fresh of mind. And when Chris and Sarah have achieved that, they're able to mark this goal as achieved and keep track of all of their timelines. Now I'm going to unachieve this because they haven't achieved that just yet, but it's really helpful to unpack your goals and then for Chris and Sarah put in targets in their timeline where they can make them actionable and very clear targeted. So what I've been able to show you so far and more is how Chris and Sarah have been able to unpack their goals and vision, see if their goals are realistic and achievable, and then make a plan on how they plan to achieve it. So hopefully that's been really helpful. Now handing over to you, Ben.
Thanks, Jade. I mean, it was a really good example of breaking down big, hairy, audacious goals, those big rockets into small, manageable quarterly savings goals, and seeing where essential and discretionary spending can be then manipulated inside Money Stretch. So, you know, raise your hands, guys, if you got some value out of that, and you can see the power of that cash flow modeling that you can do through Money Stretch. And once you've got your financial numbers in there. So let's just recap what we did in terms of what tools that we used as part of, you know, the story that Jade's just told about Sarah and Chris in their sort of mid to late 20s. They're on a mission to get their first home, and so we can see they use Lifestyle by Design. They use the Discovery, and Discovery is a great way to have conversations. Have a glass of red, think about what's important to you, try and sequence those into the right order, and then get about sort of putting those goals into a documented My Goal section, because remember, we also know from the science that a written goal is more likely to be achieved because you're making it, you know, you're grounding it in some type of context. And then, of course, the power of the My Financials area and the financial cards. And we saw a little idea about archive cards in there with the wedding. So you should never really delete cards. You should just archive them, because all of that data is going to be in those future insights and those historical insights and legacy data insights that we're building out for clients. Of course, the home dashboard, you know, one of the favorite places to go to get a snapshot or a rundown of your financial position. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the power of Money Stretch to give you instant feedback in terms of change of income or increased cost or expenditure that might come into the household. So thank you very much for that summary, Jade, in terms of what you were looking at there. All right, so let's now fast forward to when Sarah and Chris are now in their mid-30s, some 7 years later. And I'm now going to hand over to Ulrich, who's then going to basically look at the next big rocks in the jar. And you can see a clue there in terms of investment property career and a bit of wealth accumulation focus. So over to you, Ulrich.
Thanks, Ben. Now let's fast forward around 7 years into the future, where Sarah and Chris are now in their mid-30s. Since we've last saw them, they've now managed to buy the family home and also start a family. Their current primary goals in life are wealth accumulation as well as furthering their careers. So here they're going to be setting up for their family's long-term financial security. Heading back over to the More platform, we can see that both Sarah and Chris are together now earning around $240,000 in annual income. Individually, that's around $120,000 for Sarah, and again around $120,000 for Chris. This is around a 30% increase on their previous positions. Coming further down over here, you can see that their expenditure position has increased quite significantly as well, again around 30%, largely due to the fact that they now have loan repayments on the family home, as well as additional spending costs for their first child. Just briefly coming over here, we can see that they've entered in a new dependent, which is their child Chelsea, who's now around 2 years old. You can see that their current annual surplus cash flow is sitting at around $44,000, which is a large and healthy increase from their previous position some 7 years ago. However, their total cash savings is only sitting at around $20,000. Coming down below, we can actually see that this is due to the fact that they've started smashing down their loan from the moment that they had the loan when they purchased the property in 2021. And it's now sitting at around $490,000 down from the $540,000, and now they have approximately available equity of $126,000 with a property value of $775K. Now, let's verify some of the information that we've just looked at. In their current family home, you can see over here, in the historical change log, which is a great way to enter in the values of your home as you're tracking it over time. They started at $620,000 in 2021, and it's now sitting at $775,000. Because they've tracked this over time, over the last few years, when they head over to Insights, they can see the gradual performance of the property at the various points in time, with an overall increase of around 25% in total. And you can also see the increases over the various periods of time. For example, over the last year, it's increased to $35,000. Heading back over to the loan, you can also see, again, by looking at the history over here, that the value of the loan has diminished from $540,000 to $493,000 over the last few years, again, showing them aggressively smashing down the value of the loan. Coming over here, we can take a look at their history when it comes to income. You can see that it has increased pretty significantly since the start, sitting at $89,000 initially, and over the course of the last 3 years, it's increased up to $119,000. Which the same can be said for Sarah. Coming over here, we can see the story of her job, income story, from 2017 all the way up until 2024. Finally, coming over to the expenses, we can see that we've now filtered this from the value of highest to lowest. You can see that the childcare fees for Chelsea are currently rating as the top expense. And we can also see some of the changes that were mentioned in the 20 scenario, where the holidays have been reduced from their initial values of large and healthy $17,500 per annum to about $7,000 per annum. So now let's return to Sarah and Chris's next step in their financial journey, which is buying that investment property. So from where we started, we've now got a $775,000 home. We've got a current mortgage of $493,000 and current available equity to invest at 80% of the property value of about $126,000. We've got an annual surplus of around $44,000. So hypothetically, let's look at a pretty comfortable investment property at $500,000 for them. Factoring into account initial stamps of 5%, we're now looking at a $525,000 initial entry cost. With some sample investment property workings, we've got a $20,000 rental income, that's approximately a 4% yield, and two loans here. Firstly, the equity release, which is going to come out of the family home of $125,000, as well as a $400,000 loan, which represent 80% of the value of the purchase price of the first investment property, totaling about $525,000 of lending. So they'll be borrowing fully for this particular property, and then we'll be factoring in 1.5% of expected holding costs annually. So before negative gearing, benefits are included. You can see that the total remaining surplus is anticipated to be around $23,000 per annum, which is still a positive surplus and looking pretty healthy. So as a quick reminder, let's take a look at why it's beneficial for a person to, or a household to buy an investment property as part of their overall family's portfolio. On the left here, we have Sarah and Chris as if they continued on from their situation in their 20s. They're just continuing to save year on year. You can see that the only property asset that they've got is the family home. And by the end of 20 years, they're sitting at a net position of around $4.6 million. Whereas on the right, we've got if they purchase that family home and also the $500,000 investment property, you can see by the end of the 20 years, you've got a net projected variance of around $1 million within 20 years. And that's soon after that's been paid off, which means that particular amount will compound even further into the future with plenty more opportunity to come. Coming back to the More platform, let's take a quick look at whether or not this particular purchase is viable for Sarah and Chris. Now, one of the quick tools that can be used to quickly check some numbers is Money Stretch. As an example, Money Stretch can allow you to project on a short-term basis some changes that you are planning to make to your financial position to see if they will be viable or not. Over here, we've got the net income of their current positions. And if we factor in, let's say, for example, $7,000 increase each, so that's about $14,000, factoring into account about 30% worth of tax, you can see that with these increases in rental income, based on the position that we've seen above, in the red, we can see that that increase in income on its own is obviously going to increase our position over the next few years. However, if we now factor into account the investment property cost that we discussed previously, which was $7,500 per year, and around, let's just call it $34,125 per year, which is the two loans for their lending. You can see the previous position in the black, and then in the red, you can see the position that would be held in their cash flow forecast if they were to potentially purchase this property, with both those increases in income as well as those increases in expenses. So here, Sarah and Chris should theoretically, based on these really rough numbers, be able to purchase that next property. We can go even further as well. If we're going to be looking at potentially having another child, we could see what the impact of reducing Sarah's income can be, let's say at 50% pay for a period of time before returning to full-time work. So this gives us an indication of what it might look like if we had to drop off one of the incomes and how long our existing household cash flow would last without making any sort of changes. All right, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's have a look and see how to use the platform after they've purchased this property. Now, before we do that, we'll take a quick look at wealth speed. Now, wealth speed is essentially an indicator which tells you how fast your household is generating wealth. You can see over here that Sarah and Chris are currently generating wealth at around $15 per hour, which is made up of their asset speed, as an example, which includes their personal property and super as the only sort of investment avenues that they currently have, their current savings, as well as the rate at which they're reducing their debt. Coming across over here as well, you see net income speed of $20 per hour, as well as spending speed of $15 per hour. So we'll go ahead and add in those properties, the property, and then we'll go ahead and see what the effect is on our overall wealth speed and speed projections. Coming over here, we'll go ahead and add in the asset first. And so we'll go ahead and create the property. Here we'll call it first investment property. And let's just put a random address in there for $500,000 as an investment jointly held. And we'll add in those income and expense items that we mentioned earlier. So here we'll have $20,000 per year. And then we'll add in a range of expenses that might come with the property. So the goal here is obviously to make it equal $7,500 per annum. So here we're adding a couple more. And here I'm just grabbing some typical values that might arise out of the, or some typical expenses that a property investor might incur based on the property that they're holding. For example, management fees, I'm taking 7.7% or 7% of the actual income itself. And finally, we'll put the rest into maintenance. Right. Oh, let's not forget to put the purchase price in over here. And let's not forget to also put a projected capital growth in place as well. Rightio, so now we've got those details in for the first investment property and the income and expenses. Let's go ahead and add in the 2 loans that we need. So we'll create a couple of standard variable loans. First one being $125,000. And let's not forget to add the purpose of a loan. So this dictates whether or not the loan itself is going to be deductible. We know this $125,000 is going to be secured on the family home. Let's assign some basic interest rates at an interest-only value. So that's about $677 per month over a 30-year loan term. We've got an interest-only expiry date of about 5 years into the future before it hits P&I. There we go. That's our first loan. And we'll enter in the second loan really quickly. So there we have it. So if before we have a look at the effect of this particular property on the wealth speed, if you remember, we had about $15 per month previously. In addition to that, for the wealth speed, and in addition to that, we had about $20 for the net income speed. So jumping back over here, we can see the change instantly. That 15 has now gone up to 17, which reflects the increase in our investment property value speed, showing how much that's gone to further our net position over time. The subsequent increase in the asset speed, increase in net income speed. Saving speed is obviously decreased because we're taking a bunch of our surplus to pay for that new property. And then an increase as well in our spending speed, as obviously we are now taking on an additional expenditure. You will notice that debt reduction speed hasn't actually reduced in this particular case because we're only taking interest-only payments to begin with. Coming back over here, we did see earlier that we were forecasting approximately $23,000 of remaining annual surplus post-purchase. So we could see over here in this example, that's actually going to be a little bit higher at around $30,000 because we are taking into account negative gearing benefits here. Rightio. So one final thing we can do as well is we can double check how Sarah and Chris compare to their peers using MoneyFit. This is something they might want to do just to see how they're looking. They might think that they're doing pretty well amongst the people in their age group with one child. This helps them compare themselves and their household to others on the platform. So you can see here, they're sort of in the upper middle rung of the household incomes in this particular scale over here. On the expenses, they're sort of in the middle, whereas they're also in the middle for annual surplus cash flow. But with regards to net worth, you can see here, there's probably a little bit more work that can be done based on how they compare to people within their age bracket. So in the middle of their wealth accumulation journey, we've taken a look at a number of tools and how it affects Sarah and Chris's position. So we've inputted the property and the associated cards using My Financials. We've verified some of the information using MoneyStretch for the new property, and we've compared Sarah and Chris to their peers using MoneyFit. Back over to you, Ben.
Thanks very much, Al. Yes, I mean, it just highlights basically the power of being able to look at that story and do some calculations on there. obviously you move super quick through there, Al, in terms of putting all of that information in, because you're so familiar with the platform. But it does really highlight those important elements of, can we afford to invest in property? Yes, we can. Where are we sitting in terms of our peers, and how we then accelerate that wealth creation story? So that $1 million outcome with just one investment property is going to be super helpful for that household as they move through. So another great example of organising all that information. And you saw for the first time there, when you add an investment property, you've got a nice list, a pick list there of expense items and cards that you can create. So you can start, recording all of that information, and then that will record over time as part of the data capture and the record keeping you keep against your particular property. Okay, so now it's my turn to now start to think about, the serious wealth accumulation, and how we pick up the story some 13 years later after Elric's example there, and we can see, just what's played out in their story. So I'm going to bring up, the live version of More, and we'll go into, their overall home situation. So assuming, they're at the peak of their powers in terms of their careers, they're earning obviously solid income coming off that. In terms of their personal situation, there's been one change, and that is that they now have a son as well. And obviously this is 13 years later, so that son would have been born quite early from, the time period that Al gave the demo. And so they're now both in high school. And so what you can see here, in terms of those living expenses, you would see grocery have increased and general household costs have increased. But you can also see here you got Chelsea with the insights in terms of her high school fees, stepping up through those private school fees that she's paying. That's also stepping up. And then obviously a new card is Will's high school. He's only in his first year there. So we can start to see the first year being recorded in terms of the overall yearly expenditure for Will's high school education. Now, the other thing I wanted to then highlight is the Home Sweet Home. I mean, look at what's happened to their property. So let's go and have a look at the insights over the journey of owning that property since, April of 2008. So they've checked in from time to time and put a revaluation in terms of that. But there's a really big uptick here in terms of, and can the market deliver that type of uptick? Well, potentially, but I reckon there's something else going on here. So I want to show you, how they've potentially used the tools and financial cards to basically do that. Now, to do that, I'm going to open up the Archive home loans, and you can see here, these are a couple of old home loans. So you can see the first one, they've refinanced the investment loan into one standard loan, but we've also changed this original home loan here. So let's have a look. This was the provider was CBA. We can have a look at this particular loan. You can see, okay, that looks like they've paid off the loan, but that looks like a bit of a refinance to me. It's straight down. And so what we can basically see here is, okay, well, they've paid that loan down. Now, where did that cash go? Well, let's go and have a look at their primary account, and let's see what we can learn here in terms of their record keeping. Bang, straight up. Okay, so they've definitely taken out some more lending here. And so how do we check that? It's pretty simple. Again, we'll go back in here and we'll have a look at, okay, the value of, the remaining loan balance of this particular loan before it was paid out, we can see was $217,000, and we can see that also in the historical log that Al demonstrated earlier. So $217,000. Let's have a look at the current home loan. That's sitting at $409,000. Let's see the historical story here. Now that started at $420,000. So it's pretty clear to me that they've taken out $203,000 of additional money. They've parked that into their offset account, okay, over here, and you can see that money rolling in. And I reckon they've done a renovation on the property. And that's effectively what we're seeing here in terms of that Home Sweet Home spike. So as they've effectively, added those values, you can see that that's increased the value of the property from around that sort of 990 up to 1.3. So they've spent just over 200,000 in borrowed money to also upgrade their family home. Let's check in on their investment property and let's see how that's also done. So with the original property here, we have it here in terms of its purchase. We'll go and have a look at how they've tracked that over time. So there's the 500,000 that they've purchased over that time period. And you can see that that's obviously gone up most of the time, but it's also had some little corrections throughout the course of time. And it's basically sitting at that sort of 1,020,000. We can also see in terms of the details there that it's been growing at 5.54, I should say, in terms of its capital growth. And we projected a 6%, so it hasn't done too bad. And then if we also go and have a look at the rental card, when we go and have a look at the income coming in off the rental property, we can click on here and we can go over here and have a look at those insights, and we can see that they've been able to continually to keep increasing rents, in some cases, some increments higher than others as part of that particular story as well. So we're seeing obviously the value of growth of that property over time. We're seeing the rental income coming up over time, and we're seeing a really healthy picture. When we start to then also check in on the wealth dashboard, we can see the power of that compounding return, moving the dial up to 2.5 million in the wealth clock position they've currently got. And obviously you can see that their wealth speed has continued to grow. Their asset speed has continued to grow over time. And I'm going to introduce you to another one of our tools here, which is the Wealth Tracker tool. And you can see here that I can now go back throughout time and I can reset that, and you can see a nice little story progressing as they've been able to continue to keep record keeping their information and move that numbers up over time. And if I want to also then break down their net worth breakdown, I can also see how that's broken down over that time period. You can see when the investment property is kicked in here as part of that particular story as well. And so you can then see those savings and those superannuation and that personal property also growing. And you can see that spike right through here where they did those renovations on the property as well. So again, we're really interested when it comes to focusing in on insights and showing that progress, because again, I made mention earlier about the power of tracking and seeing that progress. The big challenge we have for when we build wealth is delayed gratification. So one of the things that I think is a really good idea is to get some of your old financial positions and load in that old data, like what we were talking about before. So you can, at any point in time, you can go back in, say, take, for example, your home, and using the as at value, you can click here and you can add any of those historical values that you may have got over time with your property. Now, that's a powerful instrument in terms of, to say, for confirmation and validation, because if you can see that movement over time, it just gives you that confidence that it's going to continually keep growing. I mean, property's so boring. Wealth creation, the way in which we do it, is so boring. So being able to backdate and put that legacy data in play is a real value add. So hopefully that just gives you some ideas. Now, if you've got any questions for the team, we're about to come up to that question time. If you're using Money Stretch, if you've got any examples that you want to share with others in the community, also use the Q&A area and we'll potentially read those out for you as well. But that's just giving you some clear insight in terms of, what's ultimately happening in each of these particular households and what's going on. And that was the goal for tonight, in terms of just showing you some of the tools that are available inside the platform of More to be able to do that. So let's just recap in terms of what I've just talked about around their ultimate story. And we can see the tools that I've also used. I've done a lot more deep diving into historical card tracking in terms of, I showed you those archived, those refinanced loans, so you can see those relationships and you can track those. And for someone who's got multiple properties and has been doing this for 30 years, I can tell you the value in terms of, when I'm spending, anything between 5 to 7 hours with, 11 or 12 properties or whatever it is, in terms of being able to do all of that. It does help tremendously in terms of, if you've got 14 or 15 loans like I have, having those loan splits and those loan structures. And when you did refinance, showing a bit of that history and having those archive cards. So when the accountant rings me, he says, when Graham rings me, he says, what's happened here, Ben? I said, I refinance from that lender to the other lender. I've released equity here and I've gone ahead and put that together. And I've got all of that documented in the event that, the ATO ever knock on my door and say, we want to do an audit of your income and expenses. So that's a helpful thing. The historical change log, very powerful. The ASAT values that you can go back and put in time. In fact, I've recently just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary, and I think another great thing that my beautiful wife, as part of the 20th wedding anniversary, she said to me, here's all the great things that we've done over those 20 years. And she just had this nice big long list of the holidays that we've been on and the milestones with the boys being born, etc. And I thought, I want to put them into my goals because I don't want to forget them. All right. And so I might have them in my Outlook calendar, but I want them in a place where it all makes sense to me. And you can then, take a moment to reflect on the journey that you've been on. And you can see here in terms of, hypothetically, Sarah and Chris's story is that, they've lived a pretty, lifestyle by design outcome as part of, being able to invest. And we only showed one investment property. I mean, they were technically in a position to obviously add to that portfolio as well. And that's our vision for more, to be able to highlight to our users when there's potential areas for saving using Opti, or also, Opti giving you notifications about potential opportunity to make your money work harder for you as part of our future plans for that. So that's what we're trying to do. All right, so that's a really clear story. We've moved Sarah and Chris through Financial Peace using more as a very handy, and we refer to it as a bit of a co-pilot in terms of being able to be that single source of truth. It's cloud, it's available with you on mobile or also on web app as well. But that's how you effectively look to build a lifestyle by design. All right, so we've gone through that journey. I want to just highlight, sort of how that played out from a wealth clock point of view. And so you can see the power of compound coming through there. So the original asset position in their 20s when they first looked at acquiring that property, and then ultimately, regrouping again in their sort of around 38 years of age. And we saw basically what's happening there. 35 years of age. And then we went into, 48 years of age. And you can see that is the power of having all of those assets working for you, including your family home and also the investment property that we had there as well. So it's a real just clear illustration of, that power of compounding in terms of what's happening there. All right, so let's move across to some questions. I'm looking at the time that it's taken to get here. So obviously we've rounded out close to the hour. So we're going to run through some questions. Now I'm going to start with the first question, and that is Amanda's written into us and said, where's Money Smarts? Yes, Money Smarts is a massive feature inside our platform, and we have worked tirelessly to build a really simple but powerful money management tool that's available inside More. And we haven't done a deep dive into that tonight for a couple of quick reasons. Firstly, obviously we have a series of videos that are available. So if I go into the platform again, and you can see down here in terms of the Knowledge Center, we've got a wealth of information and recordings around getting started with Money Smarts, and lots of other videos and tutorials that are available inside the platform. In addition to that, we have the free book, which is effectively the manual in terms of setting up and running your Money Smart system, which is our second best-selling book, Make Money Simple Again, which is also available to download. So that's another great resource. But finally, the third and most poignant reason is we are deep in coding the next generation of Money Smart. So we're calling it Money Smarts 2.0. We're putting some finer touches on a few of the areas that we think that can improve the user experience around using Money Smart, such as, making sure that if you're tracking any of those expenditures, it then works nicely in with our new financial cards, and obviously with transactions that we'll be eventually sort of exploring how we get bank feeds into there as well. And then the other big part about it is also doing the annual rollovers. Like, what you've got to remember, in terms of the majority of the information that you have inside the platform, and what you're doing in terms of your financial cards, in a lot of cases, these are budgeted, especially all your expenses. These are budgeted spends over the next 12 months, right? So that's what you've got to be thinking about. And Money Smarts is really a rules-based money management system designed to do a 12-month forecast of your expenditure. And then obviously you can go in terms of checking in on that particular story and your money in your 7-day float. So all of that information is in there. But we are going to do a dedicated webinar on Money Smarts when hopefully in the next 3 to 6 months we'll be ready for releasing that upgrade of Money Smarts, and we'll do a deep dive into that. So I'm excited to be sharing that. Now I'm going to turn my camera on, and I'm going to ask also Jade if she can turn her camera on. And Jade, how do we go for questions? Can I get you to share anything you'd like from some of the questions we've had tonight?
Yes, it's been very busy at the moment, so keep those questions coming. If we can't get to you today, then we might be able to reach out to you after. But we've got a couple great questions, and I'm going to see if I can share my screen and walk you through a question that we have recently. Ben, I might need you to stop sharing your screen so I can jump in. Perfect, thank you. Let me jump in and share my screen. Alrighty, so we've got a great question from Cherise to say, how can we introduce superannuation into the assets? So superannuation can be the hidden asset in a lot of cases. It's one of those ones that set forget, your employer does pay that. But we do have a section in the assets column. You're able to add in a superannuation and track that as a normal card. So I'll go into Sarah's example. So Sarah's put in super, she's put in the value. It's not a self-managed super fund in this example, and she's put in all the data. If she wants to salary sacrifice, that's there for her. But the really beneficial thing to see with this asset is every time she wants to log in, every 3 months when your employer pays the super, she can update that value and really see the increase of the hidden asset here. So that's Super Inside More. So having a look at those cards, you can collect any assets that you do have into there and then increase the value as they are or decrease it if needed. Got another question here from Jason. Jason's asking about checking in on children's savings if you want to add that in as an offset. This is a really great tip. You can leverage as many offsets as your lender will allow you. If you want to open an offset and then use that as your child savings, that also can be tracked here. So if you do want to add in a bank account, you just easily click create, name it whatever nickname you want. So child savings, you can add in whatever you have that you want to give them into their savings, and you're able to track any changes that is there. So just like with the superannuation that we were showing the progress, you're able to put this in as a bank account. If you want to create the bank account, you're able to track the changes there also. So that's really helpful in being able to individually show, and I'm just going to click away, individually show all your bank accounts, as many as you do have, for your assets and any other cards that are applicable. So those 2 questions that come through, we do have a lot. So I might pass over to you, Al, to see if you have anything on your end. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks, Jade. Yeah, I got a couple questions here. Quite a few actually, but I'll just answer 2 just so that we can keep time short. So the first one I've got is from Dennis. This was answered live, but I think it's important enough to address just so that we get everyone understanding where to look. So Dennis's question was essentially, would it be possible to have an official change log or release notes published online somewhere? So the answer is yes, we are actually working, or we have been working on that for the last few months, and we're actually just in the process of bringing that onto the More platform so it's easier to access. But I'll just quickly show you, hopefully that is sharing. So just at the very top here, I've got more.com.au/release-notes, where you can see some of the changelog history that's been happening over the last few months, as well as a what's new section, which gives us some of the latest product overviews, so more detailed articles specifically about some of the larger sort of releases that have been happening. So that's obviously been a little bit more on the download if you haven't been following the actual More blog, but we will be bringing that into the sidebar for More in the next couple of weeks. So that's very imminent, and you'll be able to access that a lot more easier from there. Now, the second question that I had was from a combination of a few people. I think there was AJ and Luke just asking about the ability to potentially look at entering a net income, or there was also a question around adjusted taxable income on the home dashboard. Now, the home dashboard essentially does obviously take into account negative gearing benefits as a default through your investment property deductions, as you can see over here, and that's to show, obviously the benefit that you get on an annual basis. Now, there is mention in a number of podcasts, I believe, Ben, just around I think they're called PAYG withholding variations and that sort of thing. So that's a case where the cash flows that you're seeing here would actually more closely align to what you would receive in person or in reality. But we know that, obviously not everyone does those. And then there are tax returns, etc., which people do receive at the end of the year, which effectively accounts for that through this particular figure here. But just to address Luke's question, we will look to see if we can do a possible net. We'll explore the possibility of a net income override in Money Smarts as an example, just so you can get those sort of cash flows within here and being able to overwrite that figure. And as Ben alluded to, there are upcoming changes in the coming few months, pretty large changes with relation to with Money Smarts. So those are my two questions over there, and back over to you, Ben.
Thank you. Thanks very much. I obviously had myself on mute, the famous little trick that I like to do. So thanks for those questions, guys, and thanks, Jade and Al, for answering those questions. I've got a couple of others here. There's a question here from Steve in regards to, can you explain the financial structure of information and the way in which it's organised on the platform? Because obviously we got quite deep into the card layers today. So what I've got, see if I can bring this up. I've got a nice little sort of my financial, so you can see an understanding of how the card structure works and the ultimate different layers. So at the top layer, we've got the financial classifications. Then we've got financial items. So again, if you've read the book and you're looking at the way in which we've structured that, those items are fixed. So ultimately, that means that any sort of training or development that we can do, we can always train to those item levels. But what has been new in terms of the release of financial cards is it allows for a greater tailoring in terms of what's going to happen in regards to, so, in this particular example here, I've pulled out digital subscriptions. You can see a mixture of those digital subscriptions. So people can just sum all of those up and keep them at the digital subscription level, or they can go and break that right down and then start to track that over time as well. That's so you can go to their heart's content in terms of what that looks like. And you can also see transactions. So I have seen a lot of the questions that have been coming through about direct bank feeds or open banking, as it's called. I'm pleased to say that, again, in terms of our product pathway and, in terms of those, we've got to start with getting transactions in. So we'll be focusing in on getting manual transactions as effectively the baseline. And then we've got to connect the plumbing, which is basically then allowing consent and a few other things. Now, in terms of that, we're working through all the legislation. It's called the Customer Consumer Data Rights, or CDR. So we're getting all of that information right, because there's a lot of applications and a lot of technical work we need to do there, because getting the consent flow, getting permission from you to have access to your data directly from your banks, there is a process associated with that, and there's obviously some rules and regulations that are governed by the regulators. So that's just something that I do want to flag, that it's very, very high in terms of our interest, and we know our consumers and our community want it. So, from that point of view, I'm looking forward to seeing where we get the dev team on that over the next 6 to 12 months, to sort of being able to build that out and eventually connecting open banking to the platform as well. I have another question here, which is from Jane, and it regards wealth speed. And it's a simple question: is how fast should my wealth speed be going? That's a really great question. I think from where I sit, when I sort of look at this sort of stuff, it should be going as quick as you can possibly make it without, sort of ruining one's life and living on crackers and Vegemite and toast, right? But what your ultimate goal is you're trying to get your passive income speed replacing your working income speed, right? So ultimately it means that you need to do less exertion, and then your investments are doing that. So the quicker you can make it go, the earlier you can make it go, that's about the best way on which I'll focus on that. Now, we've had some other questions about forecasting, future forecasts, and of course in our advisory business, we do a lot of that forecasting through a simulator that's connected into the platform. But in terms of what I see in the future for us, we'll definitely have some sort of forecasting against property, whether that be in the next 5 years or next 10 years, based on the information that's provided by the user. I can see something happening there. But if wealth speed and wealth clock and the sort of those speed gauges are brand new to you, I do want to point out that there is, in terms of our More website, and I'll see if I can bring this up quickly. But if you go to the more.com.au/wealth dashboard, if you just type in /wealth dashboard, you'll get a really great insight into the tree structure that is those speed gauges as well. So I won't jump everywhere. I'll keep moving through that. So there was a nice question here about Collingwood Football Club going back to back, Ross. So thank you for that, Ross. No, Go Swannies is maybe not back to back. We'll have to wait and see. It's very early in the season in terms of that. There was a couple of other interesting questions about paying debt down that I also think is worth noting. I think we had a question there from Megan Stewart there. Guys, can you explain how debt reduction side of things? So yeah, I mean, if you're going in on a monthly basis and doing a checkup, which I think is good hygiene, you can obviously just, make a record in terms of what your current balance is, whether you're putting that in offset or ultimately whether you're putting that into the loan itself. We recommend putting it into the offset as being able to build that up, and so again, seeing that progress. But Megan, you're raising another good point about, some of the insights and aspects of what we're trying to do. We've got a million great ideas in terms of how we can continue to help households manage their money better and then ultimately create wealth. And one of those ideas is, again, doing a forward projection of when you might be debt free or, when your debts might be paid off. But for a lot of people, who are investing in property and have multiple loan splits and so forth, we've got to get all of that structuring right and make sure in terms of showing you the relationship between the purpose and also the security, and then doing all those calculations. So, I know today there was a lot of work that we were doing on introducing a borrowing calculator into the platform. And again, this is all preliminary stuff, so I'm giving you a little bit of a sneak peek in terms of some of the stuff that we're looking at. So we're building, sort of effectively MVPs, but they are at the scoping level first before they then find their way into a full development program, led by obviously Jade and Alric as part of that story. So I am conscious of time. We've taken an extra 13 minutes of your time. For those people who did hang around, thank you so much. There's still hundreds of people who are still tuning in, so we're very, very gracious to hold your time for that. We will study more of those questions that you've given us as part of this session. We'll also take on the poll that I did at the start about what you love about More and also how we can improve it. So we'll be taking that information away and we'll be connecting more in with you about sort of continuing to get feedback so you continue to love it and obviously tell other people about it. And the more people that get to use it is obviously the more investment we can then put back into it as part of our agenda for making this a great platform where you can, through more, you can achieve more. And that's our vision. So I'd like to thank Ulrich and Jade for assisting me tonight in this webinar. Again, the next big webinar we'll be doing will be on most likely the release of Money Smarts 2.0. And we've got some other really exciting releases around cash flow analysis as well, which will be coming up hopefully in the next month or two. There's always releases happening every 2 weeks. So to the point that Jade and Al were talking about, make sure you're also visiting the website to see some of those changes about what's new and what's coming as well. So we'll continue to release the newsletter on a sort of monthly or bi-monthly basis as well. So thanks again, everyone, for coming along. Always remember, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. And again, try and make sure that you achieve more with more. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.